Retro.
Are you an aspiring Jedi, or do you dabble with the dark side of the Force?
Regardless of whether you fancy yourself a defender of the light or an aspiring Sith Lord, you're going to need a lightsaber.
Podcast Stardust is pleased to partner with Saber Masters, the creators of high-quality, durable, and affordable lightsabers.
Saber Masters is preparing to launch the Ultimate Lightsaber 2.0, and right now you can get 2 for the price of 1.
So, check out the link in our show notes and go get your ultimate lightsabers from Saber Masters.
And don't forget to use our referral code Stardust to save $10 at checkout.
And each purchase using our referral code helps support Podcast Stardust.
Hey, this is Lauren Mary Kim, and I'm the stunt double for Ahsoka Tano in Clone Wars and the armorer in The Mandalorian. You're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. This is the way.
Hello and welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And it's Friday, so that means it's time to look at this week's episode of The Bad Batch. But before we dive into Clone Force 99, Jay, you want to remind everybody where we can be found around the internet?
You've got it, Dennis. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and X at Podcast Stardust.
All right, the digital line, the signal's boosted to maximum output, the shield is down, and we are now broadcasting to the galaxy. This will be our full spoiler discussion of episode 4 of season 3 of The Bad Batch. The name of the episode is A Different Approach. And I'm going to say it one more time, full spoiler discussion. So if you haven't seen it, put pause on this one, go watch it, and come back. So that having been said, before we get into the discussion, Jay, you want to give us the summary of the episode?
Oh, yes, I would love to. Omega and Crosshair crash their stolen shuttle on the remote world of Lao. Knowing the Empire will be right behind them, they head to a spaceport to look for a way off the planet. Omega hustles a local out of some credits they plan to use on transportation. Then an Imperial captain shows up. He too loses to Omega, but he steals Omega's pet hound, Batcher. When Omega refuses to leave Batcher behind, she and Crosshair end up liberating dozens of animals at the spaceport and stealing the Imperial cargo vessel. The episode concludes with Omega getting her reunion with Hunter and Wrecker. The reception for Crosshair is much more tense, though.
Very, very frosty indeed.
Yeah.
So, what did you think about this one overall, Jay?
It went by way too fast. Just as I felt like it was getting some really good momentum, it ended. And so I was like, oh, I couldn't believe it had been, I had to go back and check the running time on the episode because I don't know, it just really, it kept my interest the whole time. There were parts of it that went a little slow, but yet the overall feeling of it just really kept my attention. And I was really eager to see where it went. And then, of course, at the very, very end, I was just thirsting for more. So I was wishing this week had more than one episode, but alas, we only got the one. But how do you feel?
Well, I was thinking about that too, about how quickly this one felt like it went by. And I was like, I guess it kind of suffers by comparison to last week when we had over an hour of content given to us. So conversely, if you take out all the credits and the intro and stuff like that, I think this was like a grand total of like 24, 25 minutes of content.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it did go fast. So I like this episode. I really did. I am glad Omega is reunited with Hunter and Wrecker. I was very surprised that it happened as quickly as it did at the end of the episode. In a way, it almost felt like it was kind of shoehorned onto the end of this. And we'll get to that part of the discussion. That being said, I mean, it's a good episode. I liked it, but it's a B episode. I think what was established in those first 3 episodes and how important they were just kind of elevated them above this. And there's nothing wrong with this, but this episode, well, that's not true. There's things I may be a little bit critical of, but it was a good episode. I liked it, and I was glad to see them reunited. But it just wasn't among the elite episodes of the Bad Batch, I guess is what I want to say about it.
Mhm. Well, it's one of those episodes that I feel like it kind of is a bridge between some of the action that we have gotten and that we will get. And so we kind of have this sort of plateau at this point that we're just sort of maintaining some things, but yet even though we're going forward, obviously with Omega seeing Hunter and Wrecker at the very end, and then as you said, the very frosty reception to Crosshair and the dun 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 feeling that you get. But yeah, it's still not. I don't know. It just didn't have that same feel, but still a good episode, like you said.
Right. So I couldn't help but think of a line you said last week when we were talking about the first 3 episodes while I was watching this about how Omega had domesticated Badger and then she domesticated Crosshair.
Mm.
And I very much felt like we were dealing with the domesticated Crosshair in
Oh
this
yeah.
episode. And I don't know if that's completely 100% fair or if his better nature has just come out finally in this one, because he went from being a reluctant participant in the escape in the first 3 episodes of the season to kind of being a protector, like not just being with Omega because it wasn't a way out. It was he was concerned about her and
Mhm.
protecting her and this. At least that's the vibe I got from him. What did you think?
Oh yeah, because there was at one point where he could have just taken the credits and left, and you could see just for a split second he did turn his back, but then he just stopped.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just feel that he is definitely an all or nothing kind of a personality. And if he's going to do something, he's going to do it 110%. And there's just no halfway with him. And so like you said, it was like, and we said this even last week when that switch was flipped, it was on like Donkey Kong. And so now he's going to do everything that he possibly can. But yet he still maintained that kind of really even keel sort of demeanor. You know what I mean? He's just not real excitable, Crosshair. He's just kind of there. You know what
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean?
See, I feel like there was some real camaraderie that had developed between them in this
Mhm.
episode.
Mhm.
And there is the development of the teamwork. He's at a place where he's trusting her to do the things that she needs to do.
Mhm.
And when they're doing their schemes or whatever, and she goes into the cantina and she's got this scheme to get credits, and he doesn't question her about it. He doesn't second guess her
Mhm.
about it. He goes along with the plan. He keeps an eye over her shoulders. Well, essentially the person she's playing against shoulder to, he's got her back. And it's up until the very end when she finally says, well, maybe we should go ahead and do this your way, that he finally gets his way of this. He
Mhm.
never imposes his will
That's true.
on her in this episode at all.
Yeah, because he says something like "finally," or something to that nature. Yeah, even the imperial officer referred to him as your dad,
Uh-huh.
when Crosshair was taking Batcher away. But and as you were saying that too, it made me think that Crosshair really didn't have a whole lot of time with Omega, not like the rest of the crew did. And so he wouldn't have known about her escapades at Sid's parlor and the fact that she actually was really good at these games of chance, because as soon as Omega was like, "I've got this," and that's the first thing I thought of was, oh yeah, because she was basically almost like counting cards, at Sid's palace there. And so I thought, yeah, there's no problem. But now that you say that, it makes me think, oh yeah, he wasn't around really. So for
Right.
him to really trust her in that is a huge step.
Yeah, because I'm thinking some of the conversations she had with him before he split off from the Bad Batch, and there was that one conversation when they were in the cell, and she said something like, "I know you're angry, but don't do anything rash." Paraphrasing, obviously, and they never really had an opportunity to do missions together. They were trying to escape at times
Mhm,
together, but
mhm.
he was hunting the rest of the batch and her down. And
Yeah.
so, they never really had an opportunity to get in engaged with teamwork and working towards the same goal and missions. So it just was an interesting development to me that stood out here, because we speculated a little bit last week, or hypothesized anyway, that he's got some guilt and he's carrying
Mhm.
some guilt with the way that and I think the guilt is not necessarily because of anything he did to Omega. It's because he was kind of blind to what the Empire was doing and what the Empire was. And he was
Mhm.
only just figuring it out after he was confined on Tantus. Well, it was I can't remember the name of the planet was, where he was with those clones that had been abandoned there guarding gear that they couldn't use, only to find out it
Oh,
was
yeah.
stormtrooper gear. And then the one died, and the lieutenant just kind of wrote him off as being expendable. Uh,
Mhm.
Crosshair shot him and ended up on Tantus. So, that's when his eyes got open to the whole situation. And he told Omega last week, I belong here. He felt like he was having to pay for his sins against his brothers in that regard.
Right.
And he risked everything to contact the batch to say, look out, they're coming for the kid.
Mhm.
And
He sure
so here
did.
we are. But that being said, he easily could have asserted authority, belaboring the point, and he just didn't. He deferred to her. So
He did indeed.
yeah. So you brought up the whole card playing thing. That was a brand new game they created for Star Wars called Balance. And they didn't just give it like the surface level treatment. They fleshed out the entire game, what the deck looks like, what the rules are. And you can find that on StarWars.com. Well, not all the rules, but you can see a lot of the cards that got designed for it in the episode guide for this show. And apparently the creators played rounds of this game and said it's very addictive.
Oh,
So
wow.
I thought that's some dedication for a plot
Yeah.
point in this episode.
That's fantastic. Okay, now I really want to play this because I was pretty intrigued with it as well. Because with the cards, they kind of remind you a little bit of sabacc cards in a way, and
Uh-huh.
especially in their shape. But I know that just the lines and everything, like I'm kind of guessing that there's a progression to the way that the cards are stacked. And then there's those colored cards that, Omega threw down at the very end, and I don't even remember what the dealer said, but it was like,
Eastern
"Oh,
Stars or something like that.
Eastern," yeah, something like that, and it was almost like like an idiot's array, if you will.
Right.
So, now I'm intrigued. Like, I love playing games, so that is right up my alley, and now I wanna know how to play.
Yeah. Beyond the game, I just like the cantina that
Oh,
they
yeah.
had there. It was a nice classic Star Wars cantina thing. The droid behind the bar, which was
Mhm,
cool. You had various ruffians around. You had the Trandoshan that was just beating everybody at cards. It had very
mhm.
old Western feel in that
Oh,
way.
yeah.
And then Omega pulls the con on him, essentially hustles him to get all the credit she needs, and then she beats out the Imperial captain. What did you think about him?
Well, when I first saw him, I thought, okay, is he related to some other imperial captain or officer that we've seen before? And I kind of landed on no, he's probably just some buffoon that got sent to this backwater planet because he's kind of a jerk. And he was. But what
Yeah,
do you think?
yeah, he was Captain Man. At first, I thought they were pulling kind of a fake out on us because he walks in, and my immediate reaction is like, oh, he's on to the fact that Omega and Crosshair are around, and so he's coming and looking for them, which was not the case at all. He shows up at
No.
the bar to get his bribe from the
Hmm.
bartender, and they start having this conversation. The Captain Man says that, oh, it's a bigger crowd than usual, and then the bartender says, well, there's someone new that's attracted quite a crowd, and it's like, that's good for you and the prospects because he's a bit of a card shark himself. And so he sits down at the table and doesn't really recognize Omega, plays a game, and I kept expecting at any moment for him not to honor the bet, that he
Hmm.
was going to lose, and that would have been a trope. But he gets up and says, nope, you won fair square. Then he pulls the slimy maneuver by saying, oh, but there is a little matter of your fine because gambling is illegal around these parts.
Right.
Fines 10,000 credits, and so she pays it, and then um, he says everything's square. We completely skipped over the part. We'll get to this in a second about them, why they were trying to get credits in the first place, which is because they don't have um, chain codes, which they need to get off world, and they have to bribe this ticket officer. But
Uh-huh.
this is the thing where I was a little surprised there wasn't more of a reaction from Crosshair about this, because he kind of looked at the Empire as bringing law and order to the galaxy. But this Imperial officer was completely abusing his position here in this town by collecting bribes from the bartender and then imposing unjust fines on people for the very conduct he's engaged in. And so, at any rate, that just is an element that stood out to me.
Yeah, well, it's kind of the one thing that I think Crosshair needed to see also,
Mhm.
because as you said, he was all in on the Empire and the order that it brought. And so for him to see this other seediness and this just slimy side of things, and just to further prove that what he thought to be true, in fact, is not.
Right, right. So yeah, taking a step back, they get to the spaceport to try and get off world, and they can't get passage because one, they have no money, and two, they don't have their chain codes, so they couldn't buy a passage. And I love the way Omega went about approaching this. She tells that ticket agent, what is a problem for us is an opportunity for you.
Yeah.
How much would it cost to arrange transportation off world for us without having our chain codes? And the ticket agent says, like, sounds like you might be offering a bribe. And she's like, well, call it what you want. And
Mhm.
so very savvy of her. But, did you have any thoughts on that whole exchange?
Well, it's highly contrast with the way that she had to be when she was at Tantus, that she was very deliberate and very mechanical and very habitual with everything that she had to do. And there was just it was all rote, and there was no
Hmm.
adventure, there was nothing. And so she's back in her element again with what she learned from her brothers in the Bad Batch and all the adventures that they had, and just the fact that she loved doing all of those things. And so I think she was just kind of back in her own little element, and she was just loving every second of it.
Yeah, yeah. That was a good scene. I like that one.
Uh-huh.
So after they deal with Captain Man, they leave the cantina and they discover Batcher's missing. And then that little kid that's been trying to sell fruit outside the canteen is like, I can tell you what happened to him, but it's going to cost you. And he tries to shake him down for 10,000 credits. And this is where Crosshair just is like, I'm not doing
Yeah.
this anymore. I just can't. And basically growls at him. And the kid says, all right, 5,000. So they give him the 5,000 to find out that Man had taken Batcher with him. And you brought this point up. Crosshair was like, "Yep, too bad. We got to get out of here." And this just goes back to their escape, which was, what's your objective? Which is escape. That means you leave me behind, you leave Batcher behind. And she's like, "No, Batcher helped us. I'm not leaving without her." And so, you know, Crosshair, against his better judgment, goes after her to deal with this.
Mhm.
So we kind of covered that. We get to the spaceport where there's this giant cargo vessel that's being loaded up with exotic animals from all over the place. We got Nunas from Naboo. There are some unique creatures from that planet. There's those bird things that are from what's Arbfler, that Sunny Day in the Void episode of the Clone Wars that are there.
Oh, is that what those were from? I knew they looked familiar. I could not place them.
Yeah, yeah, that's what those were.
Okay.
And Omega really presses her luck with Crosshair. He wants to go in and storm the place and get Batcher and get out of there. And she's like, "No, I'm trying to do this without killing anybody." And he's like, "My skills are being completely wasted."
Yes.
But when they get surrounded by Captain Man and the stormtroopers, he says, he wants there's a fine to pay, and then he says, like, "Look, Hemlock's on his way. You're not going to need gold, so turn over the money and surrender." And that's when she says, "Let's do things your way." What did you think about the escape and freeing all the critters?
Oh gosh, it was pure chaos, but it was so
Mhm.
much fun because you get you get all these, as you said, critters just flying and running and going all over the place, and then there was just so much mayhem, and it was lovely though. I mean, it was just so much fun, and then to see Man getting pulled into that cage, and I'm assuming that it was, probably a Rathtar, question mark?
Yeah, I was just about to ask you what you thought that was.
Yeah, that was my first inclination. Either that or a boar gullet.
I was thinking it was either a Rathtar or yet another Sarlacc, maybe because of the big
Oh.
tentacle type of a thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I think the Rathtar is the most likely possibility out of all those. But he
Mhm.
got what he deserved because
He
he was a
sure
slime
did.
ball. I
Yes.
guess that's awfully hard to say. I'm not sure anyone deserves to be devoured like that, but still. Um,
That works for the story.
yeah, but they got away with the credits and the Imperial cargo ship, which
Yes.
Crosser says, "Hey, we're gonna have to ditch this because they'll track it."
Mhm.
But I thought that was a fantastic action sequence there. Got Crosshair got an opportunity to use the skills. He didn't seem to have the hand trembling issue during that.
No, he didn't. And I wonder if it's because part of it is that some of his confidence has returned just
Yeah.
from being out of captivity. You know what I mean? So he's back in his element and he's back in action. But yeah, and again, to your point earlier about him just kind of trusting Omega, I guess technically, as we pointed out, or you said last week, Omega is older than he is. So, even though it seems kind of strange, our mind just typically goes to, oh, well, she's just a young kid, even though Crosshair has been trained as a soldier with the growth acceleration and everything. Technically, she's older and she's had more experience. So I wonder if there was a little bit of that
Well, has she
there
really
too.
though? I mean, I'm not sure that's necessarily the relevant experience when
No,
it
not
comes
not
down
as
to.
relevant, but she's been around the block.
Yeah, she's been around the block, but most of her life has been spent in captivity on Camino. I mean, that's what she
Mhm.
was complaining to Emery about
Right.
last week.
Right, true.
And I don't know. I think there's a couple elements. There is that. I think it's also she came for Crosshair and
Mhm,
wouldn't let him give up on himself
mhm, mhm.
during that
Oh,
escape.
I
No
love
matter
that.
how many times he said, "You've got to go on without me. Your objective is to escape." That means you have an opportunity to do it. You don't think about Batcher. You don't think about me. You leave me here and you go escape. You leave me behind. And he said that, I do the same. But he didn't mean that because, it's clear he didn't mean that. If he went to all that trouble to warn the Bad Batch last season and, there was no way he was going to do that, especially if there was any opportunity he was going to meet Wrecker and Hunter and Tech, which he didn't know
Mhm.
about at the time
Yeah.
later. But so, okay, they get away and they're in hyperspace. And Crusher's like, we got to ditch this ship. And Omega says, not until after we get to the rendezvous point. I've sent the coordinates to Hunter and Wrecker. Crosshair says, it's been an awful long time. And he starts to say, they may not even be alive. And she cuts him off
Mhm.
because there's no possibility he's going to believe that. Okay. Do you really think Crosshair had some doubt that they weren't going to be alive and was trying to spare her the grief? Or he was trying to avoid the meeting with them?
My first inclination was the latter, that he's just kind of in an awkward position right now because of
Mhm.
everything that's happened. It didn't even enter my mind, honestly, that it would be that they wouldn't be alive. But he did say it's been months. Like he
Yeah.
was almost pleading with her and like it's been months. So I guess it could be either way. But what were your feelings?
Oh, I think it's 10-15% that they may not actually be alive and he's trying to spare her feelings, and, that 90-85% chance that he doesn't know how he's going to be received.
Mhm. Mhm. So a little bit of both.
Yeah, a little bit of one and a lot of the other, I think,
Uh-huh.
is what
Uh-huh.
it comes down to. So, she insists. And so they go, I didn't know this till I looked it up in the episode guide, but the rendezvous point was that moon of Ryloth where they met Hera back in season one.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't
Yeah.
know that either.
Yeah. I kept wondering if there was something special about that place. And then, yeah, it did look a little familiar, but I couldn't place it. So, anyway, so we get this, they're flying in on the moon and there's the Havoc Marauder. They kind of set up an atmosphere. I'm trying to decide if this was intentional or not, that this might be a trap, that this might be that all may not be what it seemed. Did you get that vibe at all
A little
before?
bit.
I kept expecting
Yeah.
something unfortunate to happen.
Yeah, because especially due to the fact that the hatch was open, but no one was coming out at first.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many more ships there are like that in the galaxy, but but then Wrecker comes out of the ship, and they have that warm reunion there, which is really really cool. And then Hunter shows up, and they talk about how we've Wrecker says we've been across this galaxy 4 times looking for you, and Hunter's like actually it was five, and you were the one to find us. And then they asked her how she did it, and she's like, well, I had help. And that's when Crosshair emerges from the cargo ship. And I thought the animation was outstanding in this moment when you just kind of saw the scowl on Rucker's face, as he
Oh,
started to grit his
yeah.
teeth, and then just the stoic anger that was kind of that simmering on Hunter's face as well.
Mhm.
I am really excited to see how this turns out next week.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that there's definitely gonna be some words exchanged, and there's gonna be obviously some hurt feelings and some things to work through, but eventually I think that they'll definitely work it out. I was kind of surprised though, once Wrecker came down the gangplank, that Hunter was not right behind him. That there was that little bit of a pause. And I understand it was for dramatic effect, whatever. But you would have thought that Hunter would have been right out there with him and meeting up with Omega. But
Yeah, the reunion was weird. It was just,
yeah.
but the only other thing I could think of as to why Hunter didn't come down that plank with Wrecker was, were they thinking this was a trap as well?
Oh, so he was hanging back just to
Keep the
kind of
engines
make
running,
sure that, yeah, they had an escape plan. Mhm.
yeah. And so, once it became apparent, once Omega came out and was warmly embracing Omega, and there was no hint of some sort of subterfuge going on there, he came out. Um, but yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
that's why this episode gets downgraded to the B for me. I like everything that happened, and but it just wasn't as great as those first 3 episodes. This was a perfectly fine episode of The Bad Batch, but the whole reunion, it, and I'm not downgraded because it didn't go the way I thought. It's or necessarily the way I thought it should go. It just was weird.
Yeah.
There was emotion, but I just wasn't quite feeling all of it, I
Mhm.
suppose, what it came down to. Now, you did see like a tear on Wrecker's face that he wiped away, and they are who they are. Hunter's never had a lot of big boisterous emotions to begin with,
Right.
but it just kind of seemed like the reunion was very matter of fact compared to what I thought it would be.
Yeah, the hugs, though, were very, very warm.
Yeah.
It did warm my heart. It was like, "Aw," especially when Omega and Hunter embraced, because the 2 of them, for sure, as much as she loves Wrecker and Wrecker loves her, I mean, there's something special about that relationship between Omega and Hunter, and I felt that. I did.
Yeah, yeah. Hunter is kind of a father figure where Wrecker's the
Yeah,
fun uncle.
right.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't know. It may just been the setting too, like a barren moon. But anyway,
But that's so cool that that was a Moon of Ryloth. I had no idea. That's so cool.
yeah. Well, that was a clever place to go that they would know
Yeah,
about that the Empire wouldn't necessarily think to check. So
exactly.
okay, well that brings us to the end of the episode. Like I said, I can't wait to see what happens next week. You got any other thoughts on this episode before we wrap it up?
Oh gosh, not really. I mean, I think we pretty much covered everything. Like I said, it was just way too short. We, as you said, we got spoiled with those first three together,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Well, I
It's
can
good
say this
stuff.
selfishly, it made the preparation for this a whole lot easier
Yeah,
having to
there
do
you
it one
go.
episode compared to
For
three.
sure.
So, all right. Well, with that, I just want to thank everybody for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and our discussion of the Bad Batch for this week. We hope you've enjoyed the episode. And if you did, you want to get our future coverage of episodes of the Bad Batch and everything else we like to talk about with Star Wars, make sure you hit that subscribe button on your podcatcher of choice, wherever it is that you get your podcatchers, wherever it is you get your podcasts, and you'll get all those future episodes as they come out on a weekly basis. I also like to remind you that you can find all episodes of the podcast at our home on retrozap.com, which is home to a bunch of other great podcasts covering all the geeky topics that you know and love. And as always, we greatly appreciate your 5-star ratings, reviews, on whatever podcatcher it is you use for your podcast, especially if that is Apple Podcasts. And we also appreciate it when you share the show and your favorite episodes on social media with your friends. Jay, you gave out what those social media contacts were at the top of the episode. You want to do that one more time with the other places we can be found online?
You got it. Yes, we are very easily found on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Podcast Stardust. And we have tons of other places to find us as well. And we really do appreciate all of the sharing of the show that we've been able to hear about, because I know I've had a lot of people that have approached me and have said, "Hey, I found your podcast." And, or, where can you guys be found? And I say literally everywhere. And it's true. So we are on Spotify, we are on YouTube, YouTube Music, and those have been some great platforms for us. And so head over to all of those, like and subscribe. And we also have some other fun things going on, like our Pinterest boards and also our Discord, which has been a lot of fun. So if you're up for some real time chatter, you can head over to our show page, click on our community tab, and it'll take you right to where you need to go. And we are just one of all kinds of different rooms over on Discord. So all of the Retro Zap shows have their own rooms, and there's tons of other pop culture kinds of things too. So, once you get a chance to talk to us, you can pop over to some of the other rooms as well. And we've actually been having quite the conversation about our Ultimate Lightsabers 2.0 that Dennis and I recently received from Saber Masters. So we are partnering with Saber Masters right now. And so if you head over to our show page, we also have a link there, but you can head directly to sabermasters.com/discount/Stardust, and or you can just enter the code Stardust at discount, and you will receive an extra $10 off of your total price of your lightsabers. And right now they are having a 2-for-1 deal. So you get 2 of the Ultimate Lightsaber 2.0 for $199. And Dennis and I are having all kinds of fun. I will speak for the both of us on our lightsabers, and we'll get into more of those details here on an upcoming episode. So with that being said, Dennis, why don't you go ahead and fill everybody in on what you got coming up? We've got one more month till some new warp trails, so fill us in on what's coming up.
Right. You took the words right out of my mouth. We're just 1 month away from the debut of season 5 of Star Trek Discovery. And once that hits, my wife, Beth, and I will be covering it on our Star Trek podcast, which Jay just identified as Warp Trails. We usually get those episodes out 3 or 4 days after the episodes come out. They are exclusive to the RetroZap podcast feed. So if you look for RetroZap on your podcatcher choice, you'll find them there. And then, of course, you can just go to retrozap.com and look for the Warp Trails page, and you'll get all of those episodes and our back episodes as well. Jay, I know you are just getting busier by the week with cosplay. So what is the recent updates that you have for us?
Oh, yeah. So 1 month until April for me also means that I've got tons of stuff going on. So you can catch up with all of my latest adventures over on my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay. And you can hit me up as Ahsoka and Hera from both the Rebel series and the Ahsoka series, Fourth Sister from the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, and very hard at work on my original concept Mandalorian. I'm super excited because I've got some armor 3D printed just recently this week. And so it's coming together slowly but surely. So you can head over to my Instagram page and, like I said, just catch up with all of those adventures.
All right. So, upcoming on the show, on Monday, we'll have a look at recent Star Wars news. And then on Wednesday, we are wrapping up our discussions of Star Wars Infinities with a look at the Return of the Jedi story. And that'll be fun. So, make sure you join us for that. So, thanks for listening to episode 697 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great weekend. And until next time, may the Force be with you.